Take a breath right now. Don't overthink it, just notice it. Are your lips slightly parted? Is your chest rising and falling in quick, shallow bursts? We do this roughly 20,000 times a day, automatically, unconsciously. And for the vast majority of us living in the modern world, we are doing it completely wrong.
It is one of the greatest biological ironies of our time. We obsess over what we eat, how we exercise, the supplements we take to optimize our brains, yet we completely ignore the very mechanism that keeps the entire system running. Breathing is not merely the mechanical exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide, it is a highly sophisticated neural regulation system.
And that is exactly what we are diving into today. The idea that the way we breathe is literally reprogramming our brains, shaping our attention, our stress levels, our emotional stability, and our raw cognitive performance. It feels almost too simple to be true, but the science emerging around this is absolutely staggering. We are finding out that the nose isn't just a facial feature, it is essentially a neurological control board for the mind.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. For decades, we treated the respiratory system and the brain as two separate entities, interacting only to keep us from passing out. But the reality is that respiratory patterns directly influence the autonomic nervous system, the synchronization of brain waves, and the chemical environment of the prefrontal cortex. When you breathe through your nose, you are actively optimizing human cognition. When you breathe through your mouth, you are quite literally short-circuiting it.
Let's start right there with this mouth breathing epidemic, because if you look around a modern office or watch people scrolling on their phones or even observe people driving, you see it everywhere. Jaws slack, mouths open, shoulders hunched. We look like a species that has forgotten how to use its own hardware.
We have engineered an environment that practically forces us into physiological dysfunction. Chronic low-grade stress, sedentary lifestyles, poor posture from staring at screens all day, all of these things collapse the diaphragm. When the diaphragm is restricted, the body defaults to shallow, rapid upper chest breathing, and naturally, the mouth falls open to gulp in air faster.
It's almost like we are constantly panting.
Precisely. And the nervous system is incredibly literal. When you breathe rapidly and shallowly through your mouth, your brain interprets that physical data as a threat. It assumes you are running from a predator. So, it activates the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight response. Your heart rate variability drops, anxiety spikes, and your physiology becomes highly unstable. The body behaves as though danger is constantly present, even if you are just sitting on a sofa reading an email.
So, by breathing this way, we are basically tricking our own nervous systems into a state of chronic panic. We are breathing ourselves into chronic stress.
Absolutely. We are manufacturing our own anxiety through mechanical dysfunction.
That is terrifying, but also incredibly empowering, because it means the reverse must also be true. If the mouth is the panic button, what exactly is the nose doing? Why did evolution give us this highly specific, intricate pathway for air?
The nose is an absolute marvel of biological engineering. When you bypass it by breathing through your mouth, you are skipping a vital biochemical preparation chamber. First, the nasal passages filter out pathogens and pollutants. They warm and humidify the air so that by the time it reaches your lungs, it is at the perfect temperature and moisture level for optimal absorption. But the true magic, the absolute game changer for cognitive performance, is a molecule called nitric oxide.
Nitric oxide. I've heard this mentioned in fitness circles, usually regarding blood flow and muscle pumps, but how does it relate to simply breathing through your nose?
When air passes through the nasal cavity, it picks up nitric oxide, which is produced in the paranasal sinuses. This gas is a potent vasodilator. It travels down into the lungs with the breath and physically expands the blood vessels, allowing for significantly more efficient oxygen exchange. It improves circulation and ensures that oxygen is delivered deeply into the tissues, including, most importantly, the brain.
So it's not just about how much oxygen you take in, it's about how efficiently that oxygen is utilized by the body. Breathing through the mouth is like pouring premium fuel into a car with a broken fuel injector. You have the raw material, but it's not getting to the engine.
That is a perfect metaphor. The brain is an energy-hungry organ. It demands massive amounts of oxygen to function efficiently. Nitric oxide ensures that the vascular highways to the brain are wide open. When you mouth breathe, you miss out on that nitric oxide entirely. The blood vessels constrict, oxygen delivery drops, and you experience what we commonly call brain fog. That sluggish, heavy feeling where focus feels impossible.
It makes you wonder how much of our modern attention deficit and chronic fatigue is just a direct result of starving our brains of efficient oxygen delivery. But it goes even deeper than blood flow, doesn't it? Let's talk about the physical mechanics, the diaphragm, and the vagus nerve, because this is where the mind-body connection stops being a mystical concept and becomes pure hard wiring.
Yes, the vagus nerve is the superhighway of the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest or calm and connect network. It wanders from the brainstem all the way down through the chest and into the abdomen, interacting with the heart, the lungs, and the digestive tract. When you take a slow, deep nasal inhale and your diaphragm expands downward, it physically stimulates the vagus nerve.
It's like pulling the emergency brake on stress.
Exactly. That stimulation sends a massive, undeniable signal up to the brain that says, we are safe. The heart rate immediately begins to stabilize. Stress chemistry, like cortisol and adrenaline, begins to clear out of the bloodstream. And neurologically, the amygdala, the brain's fear and threat center, powers down, while the prefrontal cortex, the center for logic, executive function, and deep focus comes back online.
I love that. Breathing rhythm literally becomes neurological rhythm. It dictates who is driving the car, the panicked amygdala, or the rational prefrontal cortex. It's wild to think that when I'm overwhelmed with a complex project, the absolute best thing I can do for my intelligence in that moment is to just close my mouth and breathe into my stomach.
It is the ultimate biological hack. You cannot simply think your way out of a stress response. If your amygdala is firing, telling yourself to calm down is like whispering at a fire alarm, but you can breathe your way out of it. The nervous system will always prioritize the physical data it receives from the breath.
Okay, let's push into what I think is the most sci-fi futuristic aspect of all this, brain oscillations. The idea that our breath is somehow syncing up with our actual brain waves. How does that even work?
This is one of the most exciting frontiers in respiratory neuroscience. We are discovering that the rhythm of our breathing essentially acts as a pacemaker for the brain. When you breathe through your nose, the airflow stimulates sensory neurons in the olfactory bulb. Those neurons are directly wired into the hippocampus, which handles memory, and the amygdala, which handles emotion.
So the air hitting the inside of the nose is physically plucking the strings of the brain's memory and emotion centers.
Beautifully put. Yes. And as you breathe rhythmically, especially at a slow, controlled pace, your brainwaves, particularly the slow oscillations associated with deep focus and memory consolidation, begin to synchronize with your respiratory cycle. The entire neural network organizes itself around the timing of your breath.
That is profound. It's like the breath is the metronome for the mind. If the metronome is erratic, fast, and shallow, like mouth breathing, the orchestra of the brain plays out of tune. It's chaotic. But if the metronome is slow, steady, and nasal, the brain enters a state of flow.
That is exactly what the data suggests. Cognitive processing, memory recall, and even emotional regulation are significantly sharper during the inhalation phase of nasal breathing compared to exhalation, and practically non-existent in terms of optimization when breathing through the mouth. We are rhythmic creatures down to our cellular level.
Which brings up a massive issue: sleep. Because we can try to control our breath while we are awake, listening to this, working at our desks. But what happens for the 1/3 of our lives when we are completely unconscious?
Sleep is where the airway crisis truly reveals its devastating costs. When you fall asleep, muscle tone relaxes. If your jaw falls open and you begin to mouth breathe, the tongue falls back, the airway narrows, and the breathing becomes turbulent. This leads to snoring, micro-awakenings, and a highly fragmented sleep architecture.
So even if you are in bed for 8 hours, your brain isn't actually resting. It's fighting for its life.
Precisely. Your brain is essentially suffocating in slow motion. It repeatedly triggers microbursts of adrenaline to wake you up just enough to gasp for air. You spend the entire night trapped in a sympathetic nervous system stress loop. You wake up exhausted. Your mouth is dry. Your prefrontal cortex is impaired, and your baseline anxiety for the day is already sky high.
And then we try to fix that exhaustion with 3 cups of coffee, which just spikes our anxiety and shallow breathing even more. It's a vicious cycle. But when we switch to nasal breathing at night, perhaps by using sleep tape or just training the jaw to stay shut, what changes in the brain's recovery process?
Everything changes. Efficient nasal breathing during sleep maintains a stable, open airway. The continuous supply of nitric oxide keeps blood oxygen levels optimized. But most importantly, the slow, rhythmic, diaphragmatic breathing keeps the vagus nerve engaged. This allows the brain to seamlessly drop into deep, slow-wave sleep and REM sleep, which are critical for cellular repair, memory consolidation, and emotional processing. The quality of your cognitive performance tomorrow is entirely dependent on the quality of your airway tonight.
It really shifts the perspective on human performance. We spend billions of dollars on productivity apps, nootropics, and biohacking gadgets, but the foundation of our neurological infrastructure is just air, how it enters the body, how it moves.
And that is exactly where the future of performance science is heading. We are moving beyond just tracking steps or basic heart rate. Emerging technologies and AI-driven recovery systems are beginning to monitor respiration rate, heart rate variability, and sleep breathing patterns with incredible precision. The next era of health intelligence isn't about adding more external inputs to the body. It is about interpreting and optimizing the internal rhythms we already have.
It makes you wonder about the societal cost of all this. If an entire generation is chronically stressed, mouth breathing, and sleep deprived, we aren't just looking at a health crisis. We are looking at a collective cognitive downgrade. We are losing our ability to focus, to empathize, to think deeply, simply because we have forgotten how to breathe.
It is a profound philosophical question. How much of human conflict, how much of our modern anxiety and reactive behavior is simply the result of nervous systems that are trapped in survival mode? When you teach a person to breathe correctly, you don't just improve their health, you give them back their agency. You give them the space between a stimulus and a response.
The space between a stimulus and a response. That is incredibly powerful. It really drives home the idea that peak cognitive performance was never just about thinking harder or pushing through the fatigue. The brain can't think its way into a state of calm. It first needs to breathe correctly.
Because deep inside the nervous system, breath becomes chemistry. That chemistry dictates our emotions, and those emotions become our cognition, our thoughts, our actions. The most sophisticated, powerful biological upgrade available to modern humans doesn't require a prescription, a microchip, or a subscription fee. It has been quietly sitting right beneath our noses all along.
Literally and figuratively. It is such a beautiful, humbling realization. The brain follows the breath. So to everyone listening right now, close your mouth, drop your shoulders, take a slow, deep inhale through your nose, let your stomach expand, and take back control of your own mind.
A perfect place to start.
This has been an absolutely mind-shifting conversation. Thank you for walking us through the incredible science of the oxygen engine.
It has been an absolute pleasure. Keep breathing well,